All right, guys, we are joined today by a very special guest. If you guys follow Canadian men's national team, you guys are going to be very familiar who this is. It's Oliver Platt from One Soccer. Oliver, how you doing today?
Good, thank you, Josh. Thanks for having me.
I know this isn't our second take, by the way, but I'm excited to have you on here, Oliver. For those of you guys who don't know Oliver, we're just going to ask him to do just a quick little background on himself and basically how he started covering the Canadian men's national team and got his gig with One Soccer.
Yeah, so I'm from the UK originally, as you probably would have guessed, and but I lived in Canada for a few years when I was a kid with the rest of my family, and then came back in 2015 and just started kind of gradually trying to cover mostly soccer in Toronto, TFC and the national teams as well. And I ended up doing some stuff for the Canadian Premier League's website when that launched, and that kind of led into One Soccer being launched very shortly before the CPL began and moving over there. So I think I've been very lucky to be in the right place at the right time on a lot of occasions, with TFC doing what they did in 2017 and then the CPL starting. My timing has been good, so I've been very fortunate. Yeah.
Well, since you got in basically at the grassroots, kind of tell me your experience of seeing the growth in the sport growing in this country. Because someone who grew up in a very small town, there's not a lot of people I could personally talk to about the sport. So to kind of see it in certain different ways through the MLS, through Toronto, through the CPL, and now our national team, and seeing kind of a bit of spike. I'm curious to see what your instinct was on it, basically being right involved with it.
Yeah, it's a different world. Like I was pretty young when I was here before, but although I played soccer every summer and I think all through the year when I was here when I was a kid, but I have like a gap in my professional soccer knowledge in those years that I was in Canada because it just wasn't really something that a lot of people paid attention to, right? And I got into hockey and other sports instead. And the way the kind of professional game is taken off first with MLS, obviously, and then with everything that's followed with the CPL, with the national teams really growing. Obviously, the women have always been very competitive, but now the men following as well. It's a completely different world to what it was, 15, 20 years ago. So it's pretty cool to see. And hopefully this is just the beginning, I think, especially on the men's side.
Absolutely. I need to know though, Leafs fan? Yes or no?
I am, yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. We'll move on. I'm a Senators fan.
Okay.
But yeah,
Well, you've
most
had
people
a
on the channel.
pretty good timing against us the past couple of years. So
Yeah, it's been fun. But we're gonna move on back from our hockey to get into the last window. So Oliver, we obviously picked up 5 points in the last window to put us on 10 points now. So 5 point windows. I think going into it, I personally thought 2 5 point windows were respectable, would put us in a good position. I'm curious what your thought was. Once we picked up the 5 points, when it's all said and done, how would you rate that out of 10?
I think I'd give it at least an 8, probably. I think the second window in particular, like 5 points, was a really good return. Having a couple of away games, obviously, Jamaica hasn't looked as strong as maybe people expected, but I think they were a bit better in that second window than they were in the first one. So I was really happy with 5 points from that. And then, the only real blemish was the first game, right, against Honduras, where I think the first half wasn't great, maybe just a bit nervy, obviously being the first match of the whole process. And that's kind of understandable. Other than that, I find it hard to really pick many faults in the way they've played and the results they've picked up. And they're in a fantastic position. Like this next one against Costa Rica is massive, just as big as Panama, I think, was. But if they can come out with that with a win, and I think they can, I think they're the better team at this point than Costa Rica and playing at home, obviously. They are in a hell of a position to go to Qatar. So that's pretty exciting to think about.
Yeah, no, and you're spot on. And when you said and I agree with the Jamaica away, it's not a poor result because a lot of people
No.
forget about the old saying is you have to win at home and you steal points on the road. So we obviously, like you mentioned, the blemish against Honduras where we drew there, which it was an iffy game. But talking about a point that we absolutely did steal and arguably could have even got more was at the Azteca against Mexico. You were there. Give me your experience on that whole thing around basically picking up that huge historic point.
Yeah, it was a really cool experience. I'd never been down there before, never been to Azteca, and it's everyone says it, but it's an amazing stadium, and you can feel the history of the place, and just the kind of environment as well. When you get to the game and you're in the police convoy and there's tens of thousands of fans obviously around the stadium. It's you get the sense that this is serious, right? This is a proper place to watch a football match in a country that is obviously crazy about the sport. So that's kind of, I think, what we're aspiring to in this country, or maybe not all of it, because some of it's maybe a bit too much, but certain elements of that passion, obviously. And I think we're starting to see it now. And yeah, the way this team, and they did it at the Gold Cup as well, because those were essentially away games.
Yeah.
The way this team goes into those kinds of environments and just does not look intimidated at all is one of the things that I think has been really impressive about, you know, the group John Herdman's built, and just also the character of these young men. You know, they're not scared of anything. Obviously, if you're Alphonso Davies, why would you be? You're going and playing the best players in the world every week anyway, so this maybe doesn't faze you. But even for some of the younger guys, you know, the mood in training and the lead up to the game, really relaxed, really unafraid of what they're going to face. So it's been, yeah, a real privilege to see these young guys go into these kinds of environments and go toe to toe with some really good teams.
Yeah, and I agree. You made a good point on touching on Herdman and the confidence he's built with this group. I know that there was a lot of people out there after looking at the disappointing Gold Cup we had when we got knocked out against Haiti, but seeing what he's basically done with his team, putting them together, and also I just also want to get your take on it, because he's not afraid to switch things up, and I think that Canada kind of, in my eyes, built a bit of an identity with that back three, and then whatever they do going forward, whether it's a 3-5-2 or 3-4-3. But going into the Azteca, he went with a 4-2-3-1, and I'm curious to see if you expected something like that, or was that as big of a shock to you as it was to me?
It was a shock to me because I'd watched them train the day before, and to give you a bit of like how they usually train, like they usually practice what they're going to play in training the day before, right? That's kind of their final run through. They don't work very hard because obviously they want to keep themselves fresh, but they, for an hour or so, they kind of go through the game plan. And so I'd seen one thing, and then when it actually got to the game, it wasn't that at all. So I'm still not exactly sure what happened there, or if it was, you know, when that change happens. But yeah, I wasn't expecting it. But that's one thing, as you mentioned, they are extremely flexible. You know, I remember talking to John when he first got the job at his first press conference, and kind of asked him about what kind of style of play he wanted to implement, what kind of team he wanted Canada to be. And he says, you know, whatever it is, we want to be the best at something, right? We want to figure out, okay, maybe Mexico has a bit more talent. Certainly at that time they did. But what things can we be the best at, and can we really excel at? And I think the flexibility and ability to switch systems is one thing that I don't think there's another team in CONCACAF that can do that as seamlessly as Canada can right now. So it's certainly one thing I think he's delivered on in terms of giving the team an edge in different ways beyond just kind of pure talent level.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, with building these versatile team and being able to switch up the shape like that, I personally think it surprised Mexico, because when I was trying to determine what starting 11 we were going with, and when he went with this 3-5-2, and I don't think they were expecting it. We obviously, I thought, we're the better team and got pretty unlucky, but it was surprising. But moving on from the Mexico match and looking deeper into the two windows, I personally saw a bit of a common trend where it came down to the third match, and we obviously had a pretty successful game against El Salvador, followed up by another successful game in Panama. How much do you think the depth has a toll on some of the bigger nations like Canada, Mexico, and US versus the other five?
Yeah, it's helping for sure. Like you've seen it, right? Like El Salvador being one example in the first window where they didn't really rotate their team at all. In the first two games, they go to Canada and they're nowhere near the level they've been in the previous two games. You know, maybe credit to Canada for playing well as well, but clearly they were tired. And then even in the second half, as good as Canada were against Panama, like again, you asked the question: did Panama pay the price of basically picking the same 11 players for all three games, or very close to it? So it's definitely playing a part, and it's something that was obviously a challenge for Canada in that second window as well, because they'd had that ability, you know, in central midfield, for example, to rotate between Atiba, Marc-Anthony Kaye, and Stephen Eustaquio. And then when Atiba's not there, you've not got that kind of same ability to give, you know, each player two games, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge for sure. And yeah, definitely the depth that Canada has, particularly, I think, in key positions like central midfield up front as well. And even at centre back, they're starting to build it out now, has been massive for them.
Yep. Yeah. But speaking of the depth, two players who didn't get much rest was Davies and David. And I personally was looking around and taking a look on Twitter and different social medias of all these theories of how Herdman's going to play them out. Are they going to rest for these strategic moments? Are they going to go here? Are they going to do this? At the end of the day, they played pretty much the entire of the three windows, and already with Davies basically picking up that little injury at Bayern, which we hope he'll be back for November. I was curious to get your thoughts on it. If we should expect us Canadians that they'll probably play in every single match, or if you were a little bit surprised to see them start in all three.
Well, I think this past window was the one where you really wanted to kind of push Davies in particular, right? Because obviously he missed a game in the previous window, and I think Canada had kind of helped Bayern out there by not taking any risks with him. And then the next window is only 2 games, so you know, in terms of this year, and obviously we can look ahead, and there will be 3-game windows coming up, but they're quite a long way off. I think Canada were always going to look at this window with 3 big games, 3 winnable games, and want to push Davies 3 games if they could, and they were able to do that. Obviously, you know, it seems to have, it's probably tired him out a fair bit, and now he's obviously gone off injured in the first Bayern game back, which isn't ideal. But I think as well that the players want to play these games. Like Davies didn't want to go home, I don't think, in the first window, and you know there was all the social media stuff around that to that effect. So they want to play for Canada. They know the importance of these games. I don't think they're shying away from wanting to play, you know, all 270 minutes if they could. It's just a case of Herdman kind of managing those relationships with the big clubs and making sure they're cooperative as we get further into this kind of process.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people don't understand is that it's not that they don't want to play, because like you've seen every time Davies puts on the Canada jersey, he wants to be there, he wants to play, but it is that John Herdman managing those relationships and making sure that everyone's happy. So
well, Besiktas just did it, right? I think Atiba could have come to that 3rd game. He didn't, so yeah, it's too tricky to manage.
And hopefully, though, by doing that, Laryea and Atiba will both be fit by the time the November one comes. But looking at Davies and David, who had obviously pretty impressive, well, especially Alphonso Davies. I mean, Jonathan David had little blunders here and there, but I thought he had an overall pretty decent window, especially coming up big in that last game. But other than those two, the household names, who else stood out to you this window?
This window, I mean, Eustaquio always impresses me. Like, he's become so important so quickly, takes so many minutes, and you can, again, just such an adaptable player. You can put him in give him different kind of jobs in the midfield, and he can do pretty much all of it. Richie Laryea, I think, has been excellent. Alistair Johnston has impressed me. And one player I think who maybe doesn't get as much credit as he should do, and I think has been pretty integral through Herdman's entire time, is Steven Vittoria. Like, I don't think this guy is doing a lot wrong right now. And he was someone who, you know, you go back to Zambrano and Benito Floro, and he wasn't always a starter, right? He wasn't always even in the squad. So the way he's kind of risen, I think, to become, you know, not just a very good centre back in his own right, but a leader of the team as well, and someone who's very experienced, really good personality. If you meet him, he's a really nice guy. I've been really impressed with him, but you could go through the entire 11, right? I don't think anyone has, you know, not done themselves justice really so far.
Yeah, I thought Vittoria had a monster performance against Mexico, and also I like watching Eustaquio's set pieces. It's find Vittoria at the far post. Just you can't get him. It's the same one every single time, but you can't get it off Vittoria. But another one I wanted to give a lot of praise to, and I usually do, it's Richie Laryea, because not having him in that Jamaica match and having him with those overlapping runs and all the energy he has going forward, I just thought he was so just important to the game in Mexico as well as the game taking the big points against Panama. But yeah, I mean, they're all coming in together, and it's not fair to pick out a single one, but those are some pretty good big picks from you, I believe.
Yeah, Laryea has been massive, I think, and you know, I know you want to talk about players who could potentially go to Europe maybe later on, but he's one who, whenever you put something in front of him where it's a bit of a step up, and he's had that going to TFC. Obviously, he came there as a trialist and earned himself a contract, and then going into the national team, like, he's someone who just seems to adjust very, very quickly to playing around better players and almost thrives when he's put around better players. So yeah, he's a really good player, and someone, again, versatility is so important, and he can plug in so many different places that, you know, gives him massive value.
Left back, right back, left wing back, right wing back, center mid. He was
all a center mid originally, yeah.
But yeah, I guess looking ahead then to the November window, a couple questions is one, which players? I mean, the obvious one are probably Hutch and Laryea, but if there's anybody else, who are you excited for to potentially see come back in the November window?
Yeah, it would be those two. I like Lucas Cavallini as well. I know he splits
Mm.
opinion with some people, and I don't know if he would get in the best 11. Well, he probably wouldn't get in the best 11 anymore when you have Jonathan David and Kyle Larin, obviously. But I just think he gives them something. Like, and I think he's a good complement to David as well. Like, if you look at the way David plays with Lille, where he has Burak Yilmaz up front,
Yeah.
who's a kind of similar player, big target man. I think that really helps Jonathan David to play off someone like that. So Cavallini is someone I think, although he's not having the best time of it in Vancouver right now, and I'm not sure how long that will continue. And although he does have his downsides, such as the yellow cards, which he really should not be picking up as he did at the Gold Cup and missed a crucial game, I think he offers a lot as well, just in terms of his ability to occupy centre backs, to be a physical presence, to lead the line in a really aggressive way, to lead the press as well. I think he gives you something. So I think he has a role to play, even though he's maybe someone who's fallen a little bit out of the thinking, just based on club form and things like that over the past few months.
Yeah, and he's a totally fair shout. I mean, we definitely didn't have a natural hold up number 9 when it came to that last window. And Cavallini's got an unbelievable goal scoring record for Canada. I know
It does, yeah.
it doesn't always translate from club to country. And in this case for Cavallini, he's struggling at Vancouver. But even coming back and not being a starter coming off the bench, he still finds a way to put the ball back in the net. So yeah, he could be a good shout. It's just whether he can stay healthy, which leads to the nice question of point target. We're at home, 2 games in November. What's your realistic goal? And I guess maybe what would you like to see?
Well, I mean, they want 6, right? And Herdman came out and said it yesterday. And I don't think they're shying away from that they think, especially because of the way the last 2 games against Mexico have gone, feeling like they should have won both of them at the Gold Cup. And then obviously this month, I think they'll really want to beat them and really want to make a statement there. So they'll want 6. I am okay with 3. If as long as they beat Costa Rica, I think they're in a really good position. Obviously, it would be fantastic to get something against Mexico, and I think they've got every chance of doing so. But the Costa Rica game, for me, is a huge game. It's one of the biggest they'll play throughout the entire 14.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I mean, 3 points against Costa Rica puts us in a beautiful place, and whatever we can get against Mexico is a bonus to that. But it'll be interesting because I mean, Costa Rica after kind of catching themselves back up, that battle for the 4th place spot is there. So if we can just take a stab at someone right behind us, it puts us in a pretty good position.
Yeah, same thing as Panama, right? Just not just boosting your own chances, but kind of pushing a direct rival back down a bit further away from you. So yeah, I think there is the potential for USA, Canada, and Mexico to kind of start to build a bit of distance in the top 3, and obviously that would suit us. So yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah, US should have helped us out by taking on Panama, but it is what it is. But moving on to our last little bit here, Oliver, while we have you here, is going to be a little transfer talk. Now, I'm good friends with a few US fan channels, and they like the big debate about going to Europe versus staying in the MLS. So I think us Canadians, MLS players have been pretty important for us, but I'm going to have a list of players here. And what I'm going to do, depending on how quick on your feet you are, I'm gonna give you a name of a player, and I'm gonna ask you what you think they should do next. If they should stay, if they should go for a January move, and if they should go potentially for a summer move. And if you do decide that they should move, maybe just throw it even a league or a club that you may think could fit them. Okay. And that's good to go. We're gonna start with a keeper who looks pretty important for us right now, Maxime Crepeau. What do you think about him?
I think he's okay in MLS, but I would like to see him in Europe, and I think the national team program would as well. There's no question they see him as kind of the long-term number 1. I think Milan Borjan is still the number 1 for now, and I'd expect him to come straight back in and play next month. But Crepeau is, he's barely put a foot wrong in a Canada jersey. Yeah. He obviously is a bit younger. I think they do see him as the solution in the long term, and I know that part of the exposure that he got at the Gold Cup, I think the hope was that it would generate some interest for him in Europe, and he could kind of take that next step and go to the next level. So he's someone I think, I don't know, probably say this with a few players, but I think MLS is a perfectly decent level. Like, you look at Jonathan Osorio, he could have made that move a couple of years ago, didn't. It hasn't hurt him in terms of his Canada chances and in terms of his progression as a player. Like, it's a good league. But if you have the opportunity to go to Europe, I think pretty much anyone in that squad would take it and would want to take that opportunity to progress as a player. And Crepeau is definitely one. So yeah, would not be adverse to seeing him go to Europe at all.
Would you say like a top five league? Would you say like a league, Scotland, some type of league that pops out, or just too early to tell?
I think he could play, maybe not for a top club in a top five league, but I think he could play in one of those leagues, maybe for a bottom half kind of club. Or there is the option, and again, we'll probably say this for a few players, but there is the option to go to a team like Besiktas, like Laren did, where you play in maybe a bit of a smaller league, but you play Champions League football or Europa League football as well, right? And you're playing for a really big club. So something like that, I think he would be ready for and could be a good fit for him.
All right. And yeah, and I agree. I think Maxime Crepeau is absolutely going to be our starter eventually down the line. And
Yeah.
I'd like to see him make his trade somewhere over there. But we're going to start now with a few of a trend here with some defenders, because a lot of people like to think that our defenders are our weakest area in the Canadian men's national team. But I personally think that they're on the rise. I think our defense looks pretty solid. But a couple players, because of that, could potentially be linked to a move to Europe. So the first one I'm going to ask you about, who's one who really impressed me from the Gold Cup, is Kamal Miller.
Yeah, I think Kamal is okay where he is for now. I think for another year or two, I would like to see Kamal play regular football for Montreal. Montreal look like they're set up to be a decent team for a couple of years here, and I think playing week in, week out in MLS would be good for him at this point. Certainly in the future, he's someone again who has improved rapidly and could be a player who gets interest from Europe in the future. I just think you have to balance it up, right? Like obviously the level may be higher if you go to certain European leagues, but there's also more of a risk that you're sitting on the bench and you're not getting minutes straight away. So I think at this point, Kamal's still pretty early in his career. And it may be best for him to get to be getting 30 games a season, 40 games a season in Montreal, playing regularly, keeping those regular minutes going and progressing from there.
And in my eyes, I think Montreal has a somewhat similar system as well. I think playing on that outside left center back, getting reps at left back, it's really, I think, help him grow and fit in pretty naturally and pretty quickly in this Canadian setup.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, whenever you can have a team that plays in a similar way, and more teams are, which is, adding to the value of these players being able to play as outside centre backs, maybe. That's always helpful.
And going from one outside center back to the other, you're probably knowing where I'm going with this one. But
yeah,
in my eyes, this is a revelation of a player. It's Alistair Johnston. I constantly keep comparing him to Azpilicueta at Chelsea just because I find them both small little right backs, but then because of their speed, versatility, they can play on the outside right center back. So I'm curious to see what your thoughts are on him.
Yeah, that's the player that he watches, I think, and models himself on. He said that a couple of times, and he's a really interesting one because I think Kamal Miller is more of he's a centre back, although he can play on the outside of a back three. He is more of a centre back than a full back, but Alistair has that ability to play right-sided centre back, to play right back in a four, to go forwards to right wing back, right, much like Azpilicueta can. So I think he's the kind of player who in past years may not have kind of caught the eye of European teams and might have found it more difficult to find that way to Europe. But because of the way the game is going tactically, where so many teams now, and obviously Canada as an example, want to have that ability to switch seamlessly between a back three or a five and a four, he's someone who is really valuable in terms of his flexibility to allow you to do that, not just game to game, but even within the game itself. And we've seen that with Canada, right? So he's someone who I think could get, again, maybe more interest than you would expect a right back to get. Nothing against right backs, but it's not the most fashionable position in terms of where clubs are spending their money. But he's someone with a really interesting skill set and a skill set that is really suited to the modern game. So again, a player who's only early in his career, and I don't think there's anything wrong with him staying in MLS for now. But he's someone who I wouldn't actually be surprised if there was interest in him and he moved sooner rather than later.
I don't know why. I just always thought like the Championship or Scotland would be a good fit for Alistair Johnston.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think his family is from, Scotland, if I'm remembering correctly. So
I thought it was North Ireland, but I can't 100% remember.
You might be right.
It could be.
Yeah. It's British Isles or something. Anyway, but so yeah, he has that link, and yeah, wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah. All right. Final defender we're going to look at is Richie Laryea. There's been links with him previously to Turkey, which I personally, again, think he'd be there, especially seeing Atakubi going over there and being so successful so far. So I'm just going to see what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think he is the closest, personally, to potentially going there. From what I heard, it wasn't far off in the summer just past. So I think he would like to do it. I think you have to look at TFC as well and think about, okay, maybe they can bounce back next year and be a team that's playing for a championship and in the Champions League and so on, but maybe not. It's a long way from a guarantee right now. He's also a player who, even though he's kind of only come to prominence in the past couple of years, he's not as young as some of the other guys. So the time is kind of now if he's going to do it. And yeah, obviously Besiktas is the obvious one. I think Atiba even came out and said, like, I've recommended this guy. He's a really good player, and he has the same agent as Kyle Larin as well. So those links are obvious. But yeah, somewhere in Europe, and again, a player I think could play at a good level, whether it's a Besiktas or like a Buchanan going to Club Brugge, or even in a bigger league for a slightly smaller club. Again, I think that would be a good step for him.
Yeah, a lot of Canadians got a little love for Besiktas because of Hutch and Larin, so you might as well go there to keep the connection alive. But no, I agree.
As well.
Yeah, but I agree. I think that it's kind of now or never, almost in a way. Like, I mean, I don't know how many more years he's going to keep playing where he's going to maybe just miss out on his opportunity. And I'd like to see him make the step, but we'll have to see. We have 2 more on the list. One more is, again, the age may be maybe an issue, but I'm curious because he's done so well for Canada. He's been such a pillar playing, and even playing as a number 10. We got Jonathan Osorio. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, he was one who I think the opportunity was probably there 2 or 3 years ago, particularly when he had that season with TFC where he scored like 15 goals or something and got a new contract off the back of that. Now I'm not sure. I think he's probably more likely to stay with TFC and stay in MLS. If he did move, I know he's always wanted to go to Europe, but maybe even Liga MX would be more likely than Europe at this point. I don't know, but again, someone who's definitely good enough, but also an example, as I said earlier, that I don't think staying in MLS anymore is necessarily going to hold you back, because he's, especially when you're a player like Jonathan Osorio, who I think has a fantastic attitude to the game, always improving, always learning from the players around him and from his coaches. And he just gets better and better every single year. He didn't get to age 26 and think, that's it. I am what I am, and I'm not going to get any better. He keeps improving. So he's one who's shown that the MLS path can work if you decide to stay there. But probably one I'd be more surprised to see make the move at this point, because he is so important to TFC. He's at home. I think he's happy there. But I've heard him say to me personally that, like, the ambition to play in Europe one day is there. So we'll see. Yeah. You never know, but probably less likely than some of the others.
All right, and now the last one. It's a little bit different because this player's not in the MLS, but I think eventually has to make the move. He's absolutely blown up our midfield. It's Stephen Eustaquio. Where do you see him going? When do you think he could potentially move? In any club or league come to mind?
I really rate him super highly, and I think he could play for a really good team in Europe. I think the obvious one would be a Porto or a Benfica or a Sporting, right? Would be a great next step for him to continue to play in Portugal, where obviously he's very comfortable, but then to get the Champions League or Europa League football, to be playing alongside, top class players in those teams, that would be great for him. But I honestly look at this guy, again, I rate him really highly, and I think maybe not a top team in one of those top leagues, but a team from kind of the 5th to 10th, like an Everton in the Premier League or something like that. I think he's good enough to play at that level. It's a high level, and it would be very competitive in terms of minutes, but I think this guy has the quality. I think he can go to a really high level. So, I'm hopeful that, with no disrespect to Pacos de Ferreira, but he's someone who should be moving on sooner rather than later. I'd love to see that in January.
Yeah, I just kept linking him to La Liga, and there's no reason. I just keep doing it just because, right beside Portugal, I think there's a couple good teams there, and I think he'd be just a natural fit. But I haven't seen any links around that. But maybe look at Braga if the big 3 in Portugal aren't there.
Yeah, something like that would work. It seemed like it was fairly close in the summer, but it didn't happen. So hopefully things pick up steam again in January.
Absolutely. But Oliver, that's all the time I guess we have today. So I really appreciate you coming on here. Is there any last things that you want to say? We're going to put all your socials in the description for anyone who's out there, but we really appreciate you having you on today to talk about a little Canadian men's national team and some transfers.
Yeah, no worries, anytime. If you're in Edmonton or anywhere near Edmonton, I'm hoping to see 55,000 in Commonwealth Stadium next month, so that should be fun. I've never been in a position in my life before where I'm like counting down the days to the next international break. It's usually like the period you don't really look forward to, but with this team, it's really exciting. So can't wait for those games.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let us know in the comments if you are going to the game in Edmonton. But awesome, Oliver. Appreciate you coming on. Take care, man.
All right, thank you.